London, May 1856. Cordelia Vallance had spent 7 years protecting the secrets of women whom polite society preferred to discuss rather than help. And on the morning her own name was placed upon a confession of betrayal, her first fear was not for herself. It was for the names written inside it. The Hanover Square rooms were not yet filled with music. Servants moved between rows of gilt chairs, adjusting lamps and setting printed programs upon polished seats, while musicians tuned strings beneath the high chandeliers. Within 2 hours, the annual subscription concert of the Quiet Relief Society for Distressed Gentlewomen would begin, drawing duchesses, countesses, wealthy widows, and men who enjoyed being praised for compassion almost as much as they enjoyed never needing it. Cordelia stood near a music stand at the edge of the platform, dressed in modest grey silk that had been carefully altered twice to preserve its usefulness. At 34, she had long ago learned the peculiar art of becoming indispensable without becoming important. Society trusted her to remember names, seal letters, organize accounts, calm frightened applicants, and protect delicate reputations. Yet the same people who praised her discretion often spoke across her, as though she were part of the furniture. Cordelia had never minded being overlooked as much as others assumed she must. Invisibility had its uses. A woman who was not watched could notice a great deal. She noticed, for instance, the way Lady Christabel Charnwood held the wrist of a pale woman near the side entrance, with just enough firmness to prevent escape while preserving the appearance of kindness. "You needn't be frightened," Christabel was saying in the soft, carrying voice she used whenever generosity had an audience. "Our subscribers would find your gratitude most moving." The woman, whose worn bonnet had been brushed almost white at the brim, lowered her eyes. "I was told I wouldn't have to speak, my lady. Only a few words." Christabel smiled. "Surely that's a small return for assistance." Cordelia crossed the room before she had consciously decided to move. "Mrs. Avery is not part of this afternoon's program." Christabel turned. Her smile remained, but the warmth vanished from it. "Miss Vallance. I was merely offering her an opportunity to thank those who have helped her." Cordelia looked at the woman's strained face. "Mrs. Avery has already thanked the society in writing. A letter lacks feeling." "No," Cordelia said quietly. "It lacks an audience." The woman looked up. Christabel's fingers released her wrist. Cordelia softened her voice. "Mrs. Avery, the side passage is clear, Mr. Pritchard will see you to your carriage." Relief flickered over the woman's face so quickly that only someone accustomed to watching the disregarded might have seen it. "Thank you, Miss Vallance." She left at once. Christabel waited until the door closed. "You have an unusual understanding of gratitude. Gratitude isn't more sincere because it's performed before an audience." For one second, something cold appeared beneath Christabel's polished expression. Then footsteps sounded behind them. Horace Treadwell entered, carrying a rectangular tray covered in dark velvet. The society's treasurer was a narrow man of 50, with iron-grey whiskers, impeccable cuffs, and the unshakable composure of someone who believed respectability was a form of armor. 2 committee ladies followed him. So did 3 titled patrons who had been inspecting arrangements for the concert. Cordelia saw their faces and knew before anyone spoke that the morning had changed. Horace set the tray upon the table beside the music stand. "Miss Vallance, I regret that a grave matter has arisen." Cordelia did not look at him first. She looked at the tray. Upon the velvet lay a folded document sealed with red wax and 2 small brass tokens. Both carried the society's familiar stamped design. The Quiet Relief Society used individually numbered brass counters so that an approved woman could collect a sealed packet from a participating shop without speaking her name across a public counter. A token might lead to a small relief payment, a landlord's reply, an offer of employment, or confidential correspondence from a relative. Cordelia's task was to preserve the wall between a woman's number and a woman's identity. Horace lifted the folded paper. This confession was found among records connected to a compromised relief packet. The room seemed to contract around her. Whose confession? Horace's eyes settled on hers. Yours. Silence spread through the half-prepared hall. One servant stopped with a stack of programs in his hands before a committee lady sharply motioned him away. Cordelia did not reach for the document. I wrote no confession. The signature appears to be yours. Appears. Christabel stepped nearer with an expression of sorrow so perfect that Cordelia almost admired its craftsmanship. No one wishes to believe this of you, Miss Vallance. That was when Cordelia understood the danger. An open accusation could be fought. Pity was more difficult. Pity arrived wearing gloves. Horace drew back the covering from the rest of the tray. One token was presented in connection with a relief packet collected by an unauthorized person. The second was found this morning in your private desk. A murmur moved through the room. Cordelia stared at the two brass counters. Same shape, same color, same stamped number, though she did not yet understand the significance of that. What she understood was simpler. Someone had been inside her desk. Who searched it? She asked. That is hardly the principal question, Horace replied. It's the first one I asked. Christabel gave a small sigh. This is painful for everyone. I doubt that. The words escaped before Cordelia could restrain them. One of the committee ladies inhaled sharply. Christabel's smile thinned. Horace broke the seal on the document. The confession acknowledges the sale of confidential token numbers and private information concerning women under the Society's protection. For the first time, Cordelia felt genuine fear, not because of the accusation, because Horace's eyes had moved down the page as if there were names there. Circumstances, details, pieces of lives that had been entrusted to locked drawers and sealed packets, because exposure could cost a woman employment, family, shelter, or the last fragile remnant of her reputation. Christabel spoke gently. Read it, Miss Vallance. Cordelia looked at her. What? Read the confession aloud. Let no one say we denied you your own voice. The cruelty of it was almost elegant. If Cordelia refused, they would call her evasive. If she read it, she might repeat private details before titled witnesses and become the very betrayer the paper claimed she was. Her heartbeat quickened, but she kept her hands still. She had learned long ago that frightened women were watched most closely by those hoping fear would resemble guilt. Horace extended the document. If you have an explanation, this is your opportunity. Cordelia did not take it. Does the confession name women under our protection? It contains relevant particulars. That isn't what I asked. Horace's jaw tightened. Yes. The answer fell heavily into the room. Cordelia looked past him toward the empty rows awaiting London's charitable elite. Soon every chair would be filled. Soon music would soften the room. And wealthy patrons would congratulate one another for defending women they would never invite to dinner. Yet here, before the first violin had sounded, those same protections were being treated as disposable, because Cordelia's reputation was easier to sacrifice than the Society's comfort. Christabel touched the edge of the paper. Read it. Cordelia thought of Mrs. Avery's frightened face. She thought of sealed letters, tied in plain ribbon, and women who arrived through side doors because the front steps were too exposed. She thought of every promise she had made quietly, without witness or applause. Then she lifted her head. No, Horace stared at her. You refuse. I refuse to clear my name by speaking theirs. Silence, real silence this time. Cordelia felt the weight of every gaze. Christabel's expression hardened by a fraction. Then society may draw its own conclusions. Society usually does. A man's voice came from the entrance, low, controlled, dry enough to cut through the tension without raising itself. Everyone turned. Laurence Somerleigh, Duke of Highcombe, stood just inside the room. He wore a dark morning coat and the unreadable expression of a man who had learned that society became most dangerous when it believed itself entitled to an explanation. His name still carried the shadow of an old scandal involving stolen private family correspondence. A scandal he had never fully explained because doing so would have exposed someone else. Some called that guilt. Others called it arrogance. Cordelia had never met him closely enough to decide. He crossed the room without haste. Christabel began, "Your Grace, this is most unfortunate." So I gathered from the number of people trying to look sorrowful. One committee lady lowered her eyes. Horace stiffened. Laurence stopped before the velvet tray. He did not ask Cordelia whether she was innocent. He did not ask why she had refused to read. His gaze moved over the confession once, then settled on the 2 brass tokens. Cordelia watched something change in his face. Not shock, attention. He picked up the first token, then the second. He turned them beneath the chandelier light, comparing one edge to the other. The entire room waited. Cordelia's pulse had not yet slowed, but now another feeling entered beneath the fear. Curiosity. The Duke of Highcombe looked at the first token again, then at its twin. His eyes narrowed, and Cordelia understood that he had seen something everyone else had missed. Laurence Somerleigh turned the first brass token between his fingers, then placed it beside the second on the dark velvet. For several seconds, he said nothing. The silence lengthened until even Horace Treadwell seemed uncomfortable beneath it. Cordelia watched the Duke's gaze move from one stamped number to the other. Same digits, same shallow notch near the rim, same dulling of the metal where years of handling had softened the original shine. Then Laurence lifted both pieces closer to the chandelier light. "Your Grace," Christabel prompted. He ignored her. Cordelia felt something in the room change. Until that moment, everyone had been studying her face for guilt. Laurence was the first person to study the evidence instead. His thumb stopped over one of the stamped digits. "Mr. Treadwell, you said one of these was connected to a compromised relief packet." Horace clasped his hands behind his back. "Yes, Your Grace. And the other was found in Miss Valance's desk this morning." "Correct." Laurence looked at him. "By whom?" Horace hesitated for half a second. "A clerk acting under my supervision." "Was Miss Valance present?" "No." "Was any independent witness present?" Christabel intervened before Horace could answer. "Surely the more important matter is that the token was found at all." Laurence's eyes moved to her. The discovery of evidence becomes considerably less impressive when the person accused is absent, and the people making the discovery already expect to find something. One committee lady shifted uneasily. Horace's jaw tightened. "Are you suggesting misconduct?" "I'm suggesting questions." Laurence looked back at the tokens. People who dislike questions are often the ones who make them most interesting. Cordelia nearly smiled. She stopped herself. This was not the time, yet something close to warmth passed beneath her fear, and the sensation startled her because she had not expected any warmth at all that morning. Laurence brought the tokens side by side until their edges touched. "Miss Vallance, Your Grace, how are these counters made?" Cordelia stepped closer to the table. Every gaze followed her. She kept her posture straight. "The Society commissions a series with the same crest and general dimensions. Each piece is separately stamped with a number before issue. Could two bear the same number? Not legitimately." A murmur moved across the room. Horace lifted a hand. "Clerical duplication is not impossible." "No," Cordelia said, "but it would be recorded. Each number corresponds to one recipient at one time." Laurence glanced at her. "And where? Where?" He pointed to the face of the first token. "This mark." Cordelia leaned closer. There, crossing the lower curve of the stamped 7, was a tiny diagonal scratch. It was so fine that she would have missed it without the angle of the light. Laurence shifted the second token. The same scratch crossed the same number at the same angle. Cordelia stared. The air seemed to leave the room without anyone moving. Laurence placed both tokens flat. "Why are these two charity tokens identical?" Horace answered too quickly. "Coincidence." Laurence looked at him with such calm disbelief that the words seemed to collapse between them. "Coincidence may repeat a number, Mr. Treadwell. It does not repeat where." No one spoke. Cordelia looked again at the scratch. It was not part of the stamp. She knew that now. It cut across the indentation after the number had been made. The same was true of the shallow crescent near the edge. The same accidental damage existed twice. That should have been impossible. Christabel recovered first. "Even if there is some irregularity in the tokens, it doesn't erase the confession." "No," Laurence said. "It merely makes the evidence surrounding it unreliable. The signature is Miss Valance's. You said it appears to be. Surely you're not proposing that we disregard everything because of one scratch. I'm proposing that we stop pretending a mystery is proof." His voice remained mild. That made it more effective. Horace stepped forward. "Your Grace, the Society cannot allow personal regard to interfere with duty." Cordelia stiffened. There it was, the accusation beneath the accusation. Laurence had done nothing except notice a flaw, and already his motives were being questioned. He glanced at Cordelia once. Not long enough for impropriety, long enough to acknowledge that he understood. Then he said, "Partiality would be believing Miss Vallance innocent because I prefer her. I have done something considerably less romantic. I have noticed that your evidence makes no sense." One of the older committee ladies coughed into her handkerchief, though Cordelia suspected she was hiding a smile. Christabel did not. "And what do you intend to do?" "First, no one reads that confession aloud." Cordelia's breath caught. "Second, Miss Vallance is not dismissed, suspended, or publicly condemned while the evidence remains in question." Horace opened his mouth. Laurence continued before he could speak. "Third, these tokens remain in witnessed custody. Fourth, no sealed petition in the Society archive is to be opened merely to satisfy curiosity or panic." Christabel's expression sharpened. "You would protect the archive even now?" "Especially now." Cordelia looked at him fully for the first time. He did not know her. He had no reason to trust her character. Yet he understood what the others had ignored. The archive held the private lives of women who had never consented to become evidence in Cordelia's defense. Laurence was protecting people who were not even in the room. Something shifted inside her, small and dangerous. Not trust, not yet, but the possibility of it. Horace drew himself up. And who, precisely, will determine whether the tokens are genuine? Someone who knows metal better than any of us knows scandal. Laurence turned toward one of the society's gentlemen patrons. Lord Fenmere, you employ a reputable metal worker for estate seals and fittings, do you not? The older man nodded. Mr. Vale, near Clerkenwell. Send for him, Horace said. This is highly irregular, so are two identical tokens. Laurence looked at Cordelia. Did you notice the scratch? She could have lied. Pride almost tempted her. She did not. Good. Her eyebrows rose. Good? Competent people should be permitted the occasional surprise. The answer was so unexpected that a small smile escaped her before she could stop it. It vanished quickly, but Laurence saw it. Something faint changed in his expression. Not triumph. Recognition. Then he looked back at the table. One more question, Miss Vallance. How often do tokens leave your custody? Once issued, they belong to the recipient until redeemed or returned. So this particular token could have been outside your hands for some time. Yes. How long? Cordelia looked at the stamped number again. 47. She knew that number. She knew exactly when it had left the society office. A chill moved through her. Nearly 3 months. Laurence went still. And during those 3 months, Cordelia searched her memory. A woman had collected the token quietly. A relief packet had been prepared. Then there had been a delay, a change of address, a second communication. She saw again the small leather register, the notation in the margin, and Horace's neat initials beside the final collection entry. Her pulse quickened. The original token was presented at a participating shop. Horace's face changed so slightly that anyone else might have missed it. Cordelia did not. Neither did Laurence. Which shop? He asked. Cordelia turned toward Horace before answering. The same one where 3 women were recently told their sealed packets had already been collected. Silence returned. This time it was different. The room was no longer asking whether Cordelia had betrayed the society. It was asking how many secrets might already have been taken. By 11, the following morning, the 2 brass tokens lay beneath the steady hands of Mr. Vale, the Clerkenwell metalworker whom Lord Fenmere had recommended, while Cordelia stood at the far end of a long table in a private committee room off Hanover Square. Sunlight came through tall windows instead of chandelier glass, which pleased Laurence. He had insisted that anything examined should be seen plainly, without theatrical shadows or the confusion of a crowded hall. Horace Treadwell stood near the mantel with his arms folded. Lady Christabel sat beside one of the senior committee ladies, composed and elegant in dark blue silk, as though she had come to witness an unfortunate administrative inconvenience, rather than the possible destruction of Cordelia's name. The confession remained sealed in a flat document case under witnessed custody. No petition had been opened, no woman had been named. Cordelia had slept badly, though she had refused to call it fear. Fear was too simple a word for the sensation of knowing that someone had entered her desk, placed an object there, and expected society to accept the accusation because it fit so neatly around a woman without title, fortune, or husband. Mr. Vale bent over the first token with a jeweler's lens, then examined the second. He turned each piece with narrow iron tweezers and made no sound for nearly a minute. Laurence stood beside the window with one shoulder against the frame. He appeared relaxed. Cordelia had begun to suspect that this was when he was most attentive. "Well?" Horace asked. Mr. Vale did not look up. "I haven't finished." Horace's mouth tightened. Laurence glanced at him. A difficult morning for patience, Mr. Treadwell. For delay. Those are often the same thing to men who dislike where an answer may lead. Christabel said smoothly, "Surely we needn't turn every question into a contest." "I agree," Laurence replied. "That is why I have asked so few." Cordelia lowered her gaze before anyone noticed the flicker of amusement in it. Mr. Vale finally removed the lens. He picked up the first token. "This one is genuine," Horace exhaled, almost imperceptibly. Then Mr. Vale lifted the second. "This one isn't." The room became still. Cordelia felt the words settle into her body before she understood their full meaning. Christabel leaned forward. "You are certain?" "As certain as I can be, without knowing the original workshop." Mr. Vale placed the false token beside the real one. The first was struck and then worn through ordinary handling. The second appears to have been cast from an already finished piece. Laurence left the window. Meaning whoever made the copy used a real used token as the model. The scratch across the 7 was already there. So was the shallow nick near the rim. Those marks were reproduced because the counterfeit copied wear as well as design. Cordelia looked at the two pieces again. Yesterday they had seemed merely identical. Now they looked like a question with teeth. Someone had held the genuine token. Someone had taken time to copy it. Someone had done so knowing what that number could unlock, Horace said. Could a craftsman not have produced it from memory? Mr. Vale gave him a flat look. Not that scratch. From a drawing, then? A drawing doesn't reproduce depth this precisely, unless the draftsman measures every defect. Easier to cast from the object itself. Laurence rested 2 fingers on the table, not touching either token, so someone possessed the original long enough to make a mold. That would be my judgment. How long depends on skill. Not long enough to require ownership, long enough to require access. That word changed everything. Access. Cordelia felt her thoughts move backward through the past 3 months. Token 47 had left the society office in February. It had been issued to an approved recipient, whose name Cordelia would not speak in this room. The woman had used the number to collect a sealed packet at Bell and Hart, stationers, where the society kept a discreet arrangement for women unwilling to call openly at the office. Then came a change of address, another packet, a delay. And after that, 3 complaints from other women who had arrived to find their own sealed packets gone. Horace had called each incident a clerical mistake. 1 misplaced entry, 1 careless clerk, 1 confusion of dates. Cordelia had disliked the explanations, but dislike was not proof. She had allowed herself to be persuaded by the smooth assurance of a man whose signature appeared on every reimbursement notation. Laurence looked at her. "Miss Vallance." She raised her head. "Yes, Your Grace. You said yesterday that 3 women had been told their packets were already collected." "Yes." "Were those incidents close together? Within 6 weeks?" Horace cut in. "I already explained them." Cordelia turned to him. "You dismissed them because nothing indicated criminal conduct." "No," she said, "nothing that you were willing to call criminal conduct." Christabel's gaze sharpened. "Careful, Miss Vallance." Cordelia met her eyes. "I am being careful. I have been careful for years." Laurence's voice was quiet. "What happened in each case?" Cordelia forced herself to answer only what could be revealed without naming any beneficiary. A sealed packet was prepared. The woman went to the participating shop with her token or collection instruction. She was told the packet had already been taken. Upon what authority? The shop clerk recorded that the correct numbered token had been presented. Laurence looked at the two brass pieces, all 3 times. Cordelia's pulse quickened. She had not placed the facts together before. She had considered each complaint separately because each involved a different woman, a different packet, a different week. But the method had been the same. Yes, Horace said. That proves nothing. A clerk can make an error. 3 errors, Laurence asked. In 6 weeks? It's possible. So is rain indoors if the roof is poor enough. Possibility isn't explanation, mister. Vale quietly closed his lens case. Cordelia scarcely noticed. Her mind had returned to the society register. 3 women, 3 packets, 3 entries. She could almost see the narrow columns. Date prepared, date sent, date collected. Clerk's notation, treasurer's initials, her breath caught. Laurence saw it. What is it? The approvals. Horace moved before she finished. Routine approvals. Cordelia looked directly at him. All 3 collection notations were approved by you. His face did not change, but the pause before his reply was too long, as were hundreds of others. Not after complaints. I had no reason to suspect fraud. You had 3 reasons. Silence followed. Cordelia heard the distant sound of carriage wheels from the street below. Laurence watched her rather than Horace now. Why didn't you press harder? It was not accusation. That made the question more difficult. Cordelia looked down at her hands. She could have defended herself with bureaucracy. She could have said the complaints were scattered, that the society handled dozens of cases, that the evidence had been incomplete. All of that was true. None of it was the whole truth, because I had suspicion without proof. Laurence waited. Cordelia continued. And because a woman without rank requires proof before suspicion, a respectable man requires only confidence. No one moved. Christabel looked offended on behalf of society. Horace looked offended on behalf of himself. Laurence did neither. He simply listened. Cordelia had not expected that. She had spent years watching powerful men respond to uncomfortable truths by correcting the woman who spoke them. Laurence did not correct her. He did not reassure her that society was fairer than she believed. He did not tell her she should have been braver. He asked, "If you had accused Mr. Treadwell then, what would have happened?" Cordelia gave a small, humorless smile. Exactly what happened yesterday, except there would have been no second token on the table. Laurence looked at the counterfeit. Then someone made a mistake. Horace said coldly, "You appear eager to presume guilt." "No, I am eager to notice arithmetic. 3 missing packets, 1 copied token. A confession that appears precisely when Miss Vallance can connect the 2. That is not guilt. It is a pattern." Cordelia turned toward the window, thinking of the women behind the numbers. Until that moment, the mystery had centered on her own accusation. Now she understood how small that was compared with what might already have happened. The society's tokens did not merely collect money. They collected letters, offers of work, replies from estranged families. Private answers that could alter a woman's future. If a false token could take one of those packets first, then the thief was not only stealing paper. "Your Grace," she said. Laurence looked at her. "The 3 missing packets may not have contained money." Horace went still. Cordelia saw it. So did Laurence. "What else could they contain?" he asked. Cordelia looked again at the counterfeit token. Information. The word fell softly. It changed the room more completely than any accusation had done. Laurence's expression hardened. "Then we are no longer asking who wanted relief money." Cordelia nodded. "We are asking who wanted the secrets inside the envelopes." The word information remained between them long after Cordelia had spoken it. For a moment, The committee room seemed smaller, as though the walls themselves had drawn closer to hear. Laurence looked first at the counterfeit token, then at Horace Treadwell. Horace had recovered his composure, but Cordelia had already seen the brief stillness that came before it. That mattered. She had spent too many years among polite people to mistake composure for innocence. "What sort of information?" Laurence asked. Cordelia did not answer immediately. The question was simple. The answer was not. "The society does not merely distribute money," she said at last. "Sometimes a woman asks us to receive a letter because she cannot safely receive it at home. Sometimes she is waiting for an employer to answer, or a landlord, or a relative who has refused to acknowledge her. Sometimes the packet contains directions, travel arrangements, or proof that someone is willing to help." Christabel folded her gloved hands. "You make the society sound like a secret post office. For some women, secrecy is the difference between asking for help and remaining trapped." Christabel's expression cooled. Dramatic language does not make impropriety respectable. Neither does polished language make cruelty harmless. One of the senior committee ladies shifted in her chair. Horace looked toward Laurence, clearly waiting for him to rebuke Cordelia. He did not. Instead, he asked, what could someone gain by taking a packet before its rightful recipient? Cordelia looked at the window, but she was not seeing the street beyond it. She was remembering women who had sat across from her with hands clenched in their laps, speaking in whispers because even walls seemed dangerous when one had too little power. An address, she said, a family dispute, an offer of employment that someone might wish to prevent, a letter from an estranged husband, a promise from a brother who does not want the rest of the family to know he is helping, a debt, a broken engagement, a child born outside marriage. The silence deepened. "Enough," Christabel said sharply. Cordelia turned to her. "That is precisely the problem. Enough information can ruin a woman who has no fortune to protect her." Horace stepped forward. "And yet you refuse to name any of these women." "Yes, even now, especially now." His voice hardened. "Then how is anyone to verify what you claim?" Cordelia felt the old pressure settle around her. It was familiar. People with rank often treated confidentiality as suspicious the moment it denied them access. "By examining the process," she said, "not by exposing those who were promised privacy." Christabel gave a faint, incredulous laugh. "How convenient." Cordelia met her eyes. "Confidentiality is not convenience merely because you dislike being excluded from it." The words landed cleanly. Christabel's mouth tightened, but before she could answer, Laurence moved closer to the table. "Miss Vallance, suppose I asked for the names?" Cordelia looked at him. His tone was unreadable. "I would refuse you." Horace made a sound of disbelief. Laurence merely raised one eyebrow. "Even me, especially if you believed your title entitled you to them." For one dangerous second, Cordelia wondered whether she had gone too far. Then Laurence said, "Good." Horace stared at him. Christabel looked almost offended on behalf of the peerage. Laurence continued, "A promise that collapses in the presence of a duke is not a promise. It is flattery." Cordelia felt something in her chest loosen. Not relief exactly. Relief suggested safety, and she was far from safe. But she had expected resistance. He had given recognition instead. Laurence turned toward Mr. Vale, who was packing away his tools. "Can the counterfeit token be linked to a particular workshop?" Mr. Vale shook his head. "Not reliably. A skilled metalworker could manage the casting. So could someone with modest skill and enough patience. Could the mold still exist? Possibly. And the original token? Cordelia answered. Token 47 was presented at Bell and Hart, the stationers we discussed yesterday. It should have been returned into the Society's custody after the packet was collected. Should have been? Laurence asked. Cordelia nodded slowly. I need to see the ledger. Horace said. You have already seen it. Not with this question in mind. You are suspended from independent access to Society records. The words were delivered with quiet satisfaction. Laurence turned. By whose authority? Horace hesitated. Christabel answered. By the committee's provisional decision. The committee's decision was not to dismiss her. We must still protect the archive. From whom? Laurence asked. Christabel's gaze sharpened. From anyone under suspicion. Cordelia expected anger to rise. Instead, she felt something colder. They were trying to make her absence from the records look like prudence while keeping control of the very material that might expose the scheme. She looked at Laurence. I do not need independent access. Horace frowned. What do you mean? I need witnessed access. Laurence's eyes met hers. What are you proposing? Open only the administrative ledger for token issue and collection. No beneficiary names, no sealed petitions, no personal letters. We compare dates, collection notations, and approvals. Horace said at once, that could take days. Cordelia did not look away from him. Then we will be careful. Laurence almost smiled. A difficult morning for patience, Mr. Treadwell. Horace's expression darkened. Cordelia knew he remembered the phrase from the previous day. Christabel rose. This is becoming absurd. If Miss Vallance is truly innocent, the simplest course is to open the confidential archive and compare every record. Cordelia felt the room change again. There it was. Not merely suspicion, appetite. The demand was dressed as reason, but it would destroy every promise the Society had made. Laurence spoke before Cordelia could. No. Christabel turned to him. You cannot mean that. I mean it entirely. Then how do you propose to find the truth, without sacrificing innocent women to our curiosity? His voice was mild, but the finality in it was unmistakable. Cordelia looked at him and wondered, not for the first time, what had taught him to understand that distinction so quickly. She knew the rumors about the Somerleigh scandal. Everyone in London did. Years ago, private family correspondence had been stolen, copied, and circulated. Laurence had refused to explain every detail. Society had called his silence arrogant. Some still called him disgraced. Cordelia had never considered that there might have been someone else's privacy inside that silence. She looked away before he could read the thought in her face. An hour later, under witnessed supervision, the administrative ledger lay open on the table. Cordelia traced the entries with one finger while Laurence stood opposite her. Horace remained nearby. Christabel had chosen to stay, though her patience was thinning. Here, Cordelia said. Token 47, issued in February. First packet collected 11 days later at Bell and Hart. Laurence leaned closer. And this notation? A second packet prepared after a change of address. She moved down the page. Collected 3 weeks later. Same shop? Yes. Laurence pointed to the margin. Treadwell's initials. Horace answered before anyone asked. Routine approval. Cordelia said nothing. She turned several pages. The first missing packet complaint. Another page. The second. Then another. The third. The same shop appeared each time. The same collection procedure. The same handwritten approval. Laurence's expression hardened. All three. Horace said, again, I approve hundreds of entries. Cordelia closed the ledger halfway, thinking. The three women were different. Different circumstances, different weeks. but the packets themselves had something in common. She saw it now. Each had contained a reply rather than simple money, a letter, information. Someone had not been stealing from the society's purse. Someone had been reading the lives behind the numbers. Laurence seemed to reach the same conclusion a moment later. The missing packets, he said quietly. Were any of them ordinary cash relief? Cordelia shook her head. No. Horace's fingers tightened at his sides. Cordelia saw it. Each contained correspondence. Christabel's face gave away nothing. Laurence looked at the ledger, then at the counterfeit token. So someone copied access to an anonymous number. Cordelia nodded, then used it to collect private packets first, before the rightful women arrived. Yes. He was silent for a moment, which means the thief was not choosing at random. Cordelia felt the truth take shape before she could fully name it. The counterfeit token had never been the real prize. The letters were. The names were. The secrets were. She looked at the 3 marked entries and understood that the mystery was larger than her own accusation. Someone knew which packets were worth stealing, she said. Laurence's gaze met hers, and someone knew what was inside them before the women did. Cordelia did not sleep well that night. The ledger entries followed her into darkness, not as numbers but as doors, each one opening onto a woman's private fear. By morning, she had made one decision. There was something Laurence needed to see. Not because she trusted him completely. Trust did not arrive in a single grand gesture. It came by inches, and so far he had earned only a few. Yet he had protected the sealed archive when opening it would have been the easiest way to satisfy society. That mattered. Shortly after 10, in a small daylight office adjoining the society's records room, Cordelia stood before a locked walnut cabinet while Laurence waited several feet away. The door to the corridor remained ajar. A senior committee widow sat at a side table pretending to review subscription lists, providing the necessary propriety without intruding on the conversation. Cordelia unlocked the cabinet, drew out a narrow document box, and placed it on the desk. Inside lay a single folded petition, sealed with violet wax. The paper had yellowed slightly with age. The wax had not been broken. Laurence did not reach for it. He merely looked. 7 years, Cordelia said. It has remained unopened for 7 years. His gaze moved to the handwritten words on the outside. To be opened only if I return. Yes, and she never returned. Not to the society. Cordelia rested her fingertips against the edge of the box, careful not to touch the seal. She came to us once. She was frightened, though she tried not to show it. She asked that this petition be kept until she returned for an interview. She left before anyone could persuade her to stay. We never saw her again. Laurence looked at the violet wax. You do not know what happened to her? No. Or what is written inside? No. And no one ever opened it. Cordelia almost smiled, but there was no amusement in the feeling. Several people suggested it. I imagine they did. Administrative completeness was the phrase most often used. A beautiful phrase for trespassing. Cordelia looked up. Something in his tone made her study him more carefully. He stood with one hand resting lightly on the back of a chair, his posture composed. But there was an old bitterness beneath the words. She had heard gossip about the Somerleigh scandal for years. Everyone had. Private family letters stolen. Copies passed between drawing rooms. Names hinted at in newspapers. Laurence refusing to explain himself. Society had judged silence as guilt because silence offended people who believed they deserved the full story. Cordelia said, You understand this more than I expected. His expression changed by a fraction. That sounds dangerously close to curiosity. It is. Then we are both fortunate that curiosity is not the same as entitlement. The answer was light, but he did not look away. Cordelia waited. She had learned that silence, when not used as punishment, could be an invitation. After a moment, Laurence spoke. Years ago, private letters belonging to my family were stolen and copied. I know what society said. Society said many things, most of them confidently. His mouth curved without humor. The letters contained information about someone who had not consented to become public entertainment. I could have defended myself more completely by explaining everything. Cordelia said nothing. I did not, because it would have exposed them. His eyes met hers. Yes, the single word held more than any elaborate confession could have done. Cordelia felt something settle into place, not pity. He would have hated pity, and she understood why. It was recognition. The same choice stood between them, though in different forms. Explain everything and save oneself, or remain partly misunderstood to protect someone weaker. Laurence glanced at the petition again. Did you never want to know what was inside? Every day. That made him look at her. Every day? Of course. That is more honest than saying you never cared. I care very much. That is why I never opened it. For the first time since the accusation began, the silence between them was not hostile or strained. It was quiet in another way. Cordelia became aware of the narrow room, the soft scrape of the widow's pen at the side table, the faint dust floating through sunlight, and the fact that Laurence had moved no closer to the petition than he had been when she first brought it out. He asked, "May I look at the seal more closely?" The question struck her with unexpected force, not because it was remarkable, because it should not have been remarkable. "Yes," she said. Only then did he step nearer. He bent slightly over the desk, keeping his hands behind his back. The violet seal bore a simple pressed flower, imperfect at one edge. Cordelia turned the box a little, so the light caught it better. Their faces were close enough that she noticed the faint line beside his mouth and the restrained warmth of his breath. Laurence noticed it, too. He straightened first. The space returned between them. Cordelia looked down at the petition before her expression could betray the strange, small shift in her pulse. "Do you think this could be connected to the stolen packets?" he asked. "I do not know. That answer appears to be becoming familiar. Truth often begins there. You are very severe with comforting illusions. They rarely survive contact with facts." A brief smile touched his face. This time, she let herself return it. Then footsteps approached quickly in the corridor. The senior widow looked up. A clerk appeared at the open doorway, pale and breathless from haste. "Miss Vallance, forgive me." Cordelia closed the document box at once. "What is it?" The young man held out a folded note, a message from Bell and Hart. Another woman arrived this morning to collect a sealed packet. Cordelia's stomach tightened, and it was gone. The room seemed to lose warmth. Laurence's expression hardened instantly. Cordelia took the note and read. The packet had been prepared 2 days earlier. The intended recipient had arrived that morning with proper collection instructions. The clerk at Bell and Hart insisted someone had already collected it using the correct numbered token. Cordelia read the lines twice. "Which number?" the clerk swallowed. 63. Laurence glanced at the closed document box, then back to Cordelia. "The scheme is still operating." "Yes, while the inquiry is active." Yes, the audacity of it frightened her more than caution would have. Whoever was doing this did not believe they could be stopped. Or worse, They believed the accusation against Cordelia would keep everyone looking in the wrong direction. She handed the note to Laurence. "Was there money in the packet?" he asked. Cordelia checked the notation at the bottom. "No." "A letter?" "Yes." She felt the full meaning before she spoke. A reply concerning employment. Laurence went still. "Then the pattern continues." Cordelia nodded. "Someone is not merely taking whatever happens to be available. Someone is choosing." The words landed heavily. Cordelia looked back at the locked box containing the violet-sealed petition. 7 years untouched. 7 years of restraint. Somewhere else, a woman had just lost a private letter before she could even read it herself. The contrast was unbearable. Laurence folded the note once and placed it on the desk. "What do you need? Not what will you do. Not what shall I order. What do you need?" Cordelia looked at him. "I need the collection records from Bell and Hart. I need the clerk who released the packet. And I need no one to open a single confidential petition while we investigate. Done." "You did not ask whether I had the authority to demand that." "No, why?" His expression became almost dry again. "Because you have spent 7 years proving that you know the difference between a secret and evidence. At present, I know of no one else in this room who can say the same." The words struck deeper than praise should have. Cordelia looked away. On the desk, the violet seal remained unbroken. Behind them, the corridor was already filling with hurried steps as the new theft moved through the society. Yet for one brief moment, Cordelia understood that something had changed. The most powerful man in the building did not trust her because he knew all her secrets. He trusted her because she had refused to betray anyone else's. The next morning, Bell and Hart opened its doors beneath a grey London sky, and Cordelia arrived before the first ordinary customer had crossed the threshold. The stationer's shop stood just off the Strand, respectable enough to attract solicitors, merchants, governesses, and ladies sending letters under discreet covers. Its front room smelled of paper, sealing wax, leather ledgers, and ink. Behind the polished counter stood Mr. Bell, a nervous man with silver spectacles who had spent the previous evening insisting that no one in his employ could have knowingly released a packet to the wrong person. Cordelia believed him only in part. Honest men could still be careless. Careless systems were often what dishonest people required. Laurence entered a few minutes after her, with a solicitor named Mr. Pembroke and no unnecessary display of rank. That, more than anything, unsettled Mr. Bell. A duke arriving in silence could be more alarming than a duke arriving with servants. Cordelia placed the copied notation for token 63 on the counter. "I need the collection entry." Mr. Bell produced the ledger. His fingers trembled as he opened it. The packet was released at 9:20 yesterday morning. "To whom?" Cordelia asked. The clerk did not record a name. He was presented with the correct token. "Which clerk?" A young man named Samuel Reed stepped forward from the rear room. He could not have been more than 20. His face had the strained look of someone who had repeated the same memory too many times and no longer trusted it. Cordelia softened her voice. "Mr. Reed, I am not asking you to protect the society, the shop, or me. I am asking you to tell the truth exactly as you remember it." The young clerk swallowed. A man came in shortly after opening. Plain coat, brown gloves. Nothing unusual. "Did he speak?" Laurence asked. Samuel glanced at him. "Yes, Your Grace." "What did he say?" "Only that he had come for packet 63. Cordelia felt the smallest chill. "Did he know the number before presenting the token?" "Yes." "And did he ask whether there was money inside?" "No. Did he ask whether there was a letter? Samuel hesitated. Not exactly. Cordelia waited. He asked whether the reply had arrived. Laurence looked at her. So did Mr. Pembroke. The distinction mattered. A thief seeking random relief would ask about value. This man had expected correspondence. Cordelia said, "What did you answer?" "I told him the packet was ready." "Did you see his face clearly?" "Not well. He kept his hat low." Samuel looked ashamed. "I thought he was a messenger." "Why?" "He acted as though he'd done it before." Horace's name was not spoken, but Cordelia thought of the grouped collections, the approved entries, the easy explanations. She looked at the ledger again. Did he sign? No. The token was considered sufficient. Lawrence's expression hardened. That will change. Cordelia glanced at him. Yes. He understood the correction in her tone and inclined his head slightly. Not I will change it. It will change. The difference was small, she noticed. Before they left, Mr. Bell produced one more fact. The woman for whom packet 63 had been intended had returned late the previous afternoon after discovering the loss. She had not caused a scene. She had simply gone pale and asked whether Miss Vallance might speak with her privately. Cordelia felt the weight of that request. Did she leave an address? No. Mr. Bell looked toward the rear office. She left a note. The note contained only one line. I will speak if no one is compelled to know who I am. Cordelia read it twice. Then she turned to Laurence. She chooses the place, the time, and who attends. Of course. And if she says you are not to be present, then I won't be. There was no offense in his answer. That mattered too. By 3 o'clock, the woman had chosen a private parlor in the home of an elderly widow who occasionally assisted the society. Cordelia arrived first. Laurence waited outside in the adjoining library until the woman herself requested that he join them. Mr. Pembroke remained downstairs. No committee member had been informed. No sealed petition had been opened. The witness entered wearing a dark veil and gloves mended carefully at the fingers. She was perhaps 40, perhaps younger. Distress could change a face faster than age. Cordelia did not ask for her name. You may tell me as much or as little as you choose. The woman sat very straight. Will he hear? She glanced toward the library door. Only if you wish. A long silence followed. Then the woman nodded. Laurence entered and took the chair farthest from her. He did not speak first. The woman noticed. Cordelia saw it in the way her shoulders lowered by a fraction. My packet contained a letter about employment, she said. Her voice was quiet but steady, a companion's position in a respectable household. Cordelia waited. The woman who employed me before learned something about my family. Something old. Not criminal. Her gloved fingers tightened, but enough to make another household refuse me. You do not need to tell us what it was, Cordelia said. The woman's eyes lifted behind the veil. You believe that? Yes. The woman looked toward Laurence. And you? Yes. His answer came without hesitation. She breathed slowly. The letter in the packet was from a housekeeper. She had agreed to recommend me despite the past. No one else knew. Cordelia felt the shape of the danger before the woman continued. 2 days after the packet disappeared, I received a letter. From her reticule, she removed a folded sheet. She did not hand it over immediately. It demanded £5. Laurence remained still. Cordelia knew the sum was not vast to a duke. To a woman seeking work, it could mean months of security. For what? Cordelia asked. For silence. The witness looked down. It said that unless I paid, the family who had offered me employment would learn what my former mistress knew. Cordelia felt cold anger settle beneath her ribs. Did the writer prove they had seen the packet? Yes. The woman unfolded the letter. There was a sentence quoted from the housekeeper's reply, a sentence no one could have known unless they had read it. She pushed the paper across the table. Cordelia read the line, "We know the young lady's family circumstances and do not consider them a reflection upon her character." The blackmail letter repeated the words exactly. Laurence read over Cordelia's shoulder without touching the page. "Did you pay?" he asked. The witness closed her eyes briefly. "Once." There was no judgment in Cordelia when she answered, "Of course you did." The woman's head came up. Perhaps she had expected condemnation. "I was frightened. That is why they chose you." Cordelia's voice was gentle. "Fear isn't guilt." The woman looked away. The demands continued. She removed 2 more letters from her reticule. £5 became 3, then 4. Each threat was more direct. Each promised to send copies to a prospective employer, a relative, or a former acquaintance. Laurence's face changed as he read. The dry wit disappeared. In its place was something colder and more controlled. "How many payments?" Cordelia asked. 2. "Why did you stop?" The woman's hands trembled. "'Cause I had nothing left to sell." Silence filled the parlor. Cordelia did not rush to fill it. She had learned that frightened people often needed one quiet moment, in which no one demanded courage from them. At last, the woman said, "When the 3rd letter came, I thought of going to the society. Then I heard you had been accused." Her veiled face turned toward Cordelia. "They said you sold our secrets." Cordelia's throat tightened. "I did not. I know that now." The words were simple. They struck harder than praise. "Why?" Cordelia asked. The woman looked at the blackmail letters. "Because the person who wrote these wanted me ashamed." "You never did." No one spoke for several seconds. Laurence lowered his gaze, giving Cordelia the privacy of not being watched during the moment the words reached her. That small mercy nearly undid her more than sympathy would have. She steadied herself. "Will you allow us to use these letters as evidence?" The woman stiffened. "Must my name be given?" "No." "Must I appear before the committee?" "No. And if later I choose to speak, then the choice will remain yours." The witness looked toward Laurence. "Can you guarantee that?" He answered carefully. "I can guarantee that no one acting through my authority will compel you. I can also make certain that a solicitor advises you before any further step." She studied him for a long moment. "You do not sound like a man accustomed to being refused. I'm learning to appreciate the educational value." A faint, startled laugh escaped her. Cordelia looked at Laurence. He did not smile broadly. He merely let the tension ease. Then the woman placed all 3 blackmail letters on the table. "Use them." Cordelia touched only the corner of the first page. "Thank you. Do not thank me yet." The woman lifted her veil just enough to look directly at Cordelia. "Stop them." Cordelia held her gaze. "I will try." "No." The woman's voice strengthened. "Do not promise me effort. Promise me they will not do this to another woman." Cordelia felt the demand settle over her. It was impossible to guarantee. It was also impossible to refuse honestly. "Then I promise this," she said. "I will not stop because the truth becomes inconvenient to powerful people." Laurence looked at her. Something passed through his expression, quiet and unmistakable, not admiration alone. Recognition. Outside, carriage wheels moved along the street. Inside, 4 people sat around a table with 3 letters that transformed suspicion into a pattern. A duplicate token had opened the wrong door. A private packet had vanished. A frightened woman had paid for silence, then paid again. Cordelia looked at the quoted sentence in the blackmail letter and understood the crime completely for for the first time. Someone was not merely stealing correspondence. Someone was studying weakness, choosing which secrets had value, and selling silence back to the women most afraid to speak. By the evening of the annual benefit concert, Cordelia had learned that silence could be louder than accusation. It followed her through the Hanover Square rooms before the first violin sounded. It moved in the pauses between greetings, in the glances that slipped away too quickly, and in the careful kindness of people who had already decided. They did not believe her, but wished to appear generous while doing so. The chandeliers burned warmly above rows of gilt chairs. Musicians arranged their scores. Servants carried trays of watered wine and folded programs. Everything looked exactly as it should. That made the danger worse. Respectability had always been most powerful when nothing appeared disturbed. Cordelia stood near the side of the platform, checking the final seating list while pretending not to notice that 3 women who had once greeted her warmly now avoided her eyes. The accusation against her had not been publicly withdrawn. The counterfeit token, the missing packets, and the blackmail letters had created doubt. But doubt was not innocence in the minds of people who preferred certainty. Lady Christabel Charnwood moved through the room in silver-grey silk, offering soft words to patrons and gentle explanations to anyone who asked why Miss Vallance remained present. Horace Treadwell was equally composed. He spoke with donors near the entrance, his manner grave but calm. Cordelia understood the performance. They were presenting themselves as guardians of the society, while she was allowed to remain only because the Duke of Highcombe had interfered. Laurence arrived shortly before the doors opened to the full audience. He did not come directly to her. Cordelia was grateful for that. A public display of special attention would have fed the gossip already circling them. Instead, he spoke first to the senior committee members, then to the musicians, and only afterward crossed the room. "You stayed," he said quietly. "The women still need the concert. So do the subscribers. Charity makes some people feel unusually virtuous before supper." Cordelia glanced at him. "You are becoming cynical, Your Grace." "Becoming?" The corner of his mouth moved. Then his expression changed. "Are you certain you wish to remain?" She knew what he was really asking, not whether she was frightened, whether she wanted a choice. "Yes, then I remain too," he said it simply, without drama. The answer warmed her more than it should have. She turned back to the programs. The first piece begins in 12 minutes. A devastating amount of time for London society to invent 3 new scandals. Only 3? I was being charitable. The audience began to enter in earnest. Silk rustled. Jewels caught the light. Men in formal evening dress bowed to acquaintances, while titled women settled into their seats, with the controlled anticipation of people attending both a concert and a possible social disaster. Cordelia noticed Christabel speaking to one of the younger patrons. She could not hear the words, but she saw the woman's face change. Sympathy first, then curiosity, then that small, unmistakable brightness that appeared whenever someone learned another person's misfortune. The musicians took their places. Cordelia moved toward the edge of the platform. The first notes had barely begun when a woman in the 3rd row opened her printed program and frowned. A narrow sheet of paper slid into her lap. She picked it up. Her face went pale. 2 seats away, another woman opened her program. Another sheet fell out. Then a 3rd. For one strange second, the room remained divided between those who had seen and those who had not. Then the whispers began. A gentleman leaned toward his wife. A woman in blue pressed one hand to her mouth. Someone near the rear stood abruptly. The music continued for several measures before the first violin faltered. Cordelia felt cold spread through her body. She stepped down from the platform. Laurence was already moving. "What happened?" he asked. Cordelia did not answer because she had seen the paper in a patron's hand. She took it only after the woman thrust it toward her. 3 sentences were printed there. They described a distressed gentlewoman's estrangement from her family and referred to an employer who had offered help in secret. At the bottom, in bold type, were the words, "Ask Miss Cordelia Vallance what silence costs." The room blurred for half a heartbeat. Then Cordelia heard paper rustling everywhere. Dozens of programs, dozens of inserts. Some contained fragments of petitions. Others quoted private replies. A few included enough detail that families could guess the identities behind them. The music stopped entirely. "This cannot be happening," one committee lady whispered. Cordelia looked toward the program table. Every packet had been sealed before the audience arrived. Someone had tampered with them. Someone had planned this carefully enough to know exactly where public shame would do the most damage. Then a woman rose from the 4th row. She was middle-aged, plainly dressed, and visibly trembling. Cordelia recognized her. Not by name, by number. She had once sought help through the society after losing her position. The woman held one of the printed sheets in her hand. "You promised me," she said. Her voice was not loud, but the room heard it. Cordelia felt every gaze shift toward her. The woman's eyes were wet with shock and anger. "You promised my name was safe." The accusation hurt more than Christabel's or Horace's ever could. This woman had trusted her. She had every reason to feel betrayed. Cordelia could have defended herself by explaining that other packets had been stolen. She could have cited the counterfeit token. She could have named the blackmail victim who had already come forward. She did none of those things. The injured woman had not consented to become part of Cordelia's defense. Cordelia said, "I did, and I have not broken that promise." "Then how is this here?" The woman held up the printed sheet. Cordelia looked at it. "I do not know yet." A murmur moved through the audience. Christabel stepped forward with a face composed into sorrow. "Miss Vallance, surely now you understand why the sealed archive must be examined." Cordelia turned to her. "No." The answer was immediate. Christabel's eyebrows rose. "No? Opening every private petition will not repair this violation. It will repeat it." Horace came closer. "And yet the leaked details must have come from somewhere." "Yes, then the archive should be inspected." "Not without consent. You are still protecting secrecy when secrecy has become the problem." Cordelia looked at him steadily. "Secrecy is not the problem. Theft is." The words landed sharply. Laurence stepped beside her, not in front of her. "No sealed petition will be opened merely because panic demands it." One of the senior patrons rose. "Your Grace, this concerns the reputation of every subscriber here." Laurence looked toward him. "It concerns more than reputation. It concerns people who trusted this society because they believed their private lives would not be sold as entertainment." Another voice called from the room, "And what of Miss Vallance?" Christabel answered before Laurence could. "Until the matter is resolved, surely Miss Vallance must be suspended from active duty." Cordelia heard the approval in several murmurs. Others remained silent. Horace produced the language of procedure. A temporary measure only. Cordelia understood what was happening. The scandal had been designed not merely to shame her, but to remove her from the records and justify opening the archive. For the first time, the full shape of the attack became visible. She looked at the printed sheet again. One sentence caught her attention. She knew those words. Not because they came from a sealed petition. They did not. They came from a reply packet that had once waited at Bell and Hart. Her pulse changed. Laurence noticed. "What is it?" he asked quietly. Cordelia read the line again. Then she looked up. This sentence was never in the petition room. Horace went still. Christabel's expression did not change. Laurence asked, "Where was it?" Cordelia turned toward him, and the room seemed to disappear around the answer. In a packet someone collected twice. By 9 the next morning, the committee room at Hanover Square had been stripped of music, flowers, and polite illusion. The abandoned program inserts lay in neat bundles upon the long table, like evidence of a disease no one wished to name. Cordelia stood at one end of the room, still wearing the same grey silk she had worn the previous evening, though the gown now carried a faint crease where she had clutched it during the journey home. She had slept for less than 2 hours. Laurence had slept no more, if the shadows beneath his eyes were any indication. Lady Christabel sat near the fireplace in severe black, transformed by morning light from sorrowful patroness into something colder. Horace Treadwell occupied the chair beside her. 3 senior subscribers had been summoned before breakfast, and 2 of them had already declared that the society could not survive unless every sealed petition was opened and examined. Cordelia listened without interrupting. She had spent years learning the difference between being silent and being powerless. They were not the same. "The situation is intolerable," said Sir Edmund Valehurst, a heavy-jowled subscriber whose annual generosity was exceeded only by his need to have it mentioned. Private details appeared in public programs. Either Miss Vallance allowed access or someone breached the archive. "The archive wasn't breached," Cordelia said. "You cannot know that. I can know which sentences were never stored there." Horace leaned forward. "Then prove it." Cordelia turned to him. "I intend to. By refusing inspection. By refusing indiscriminate exposure." Christabel gave a soft sigh. "Miss Vallance, no one enjoys this, but innocence requires openness." Cordelia felt the words settle over the room. They sounded reasonable. That was why they were dangerous. She looked at Christabel steadily. "Whose openness? Yours, to begin with. The petitions are not mine. You control them. I guard them." Christabel's expression tightened. That distinction is increasingly convenient. Laurence, who had been standing near the windows, spoke without raising his voice. "Convenience appears to be doing a remarkable amount of work in this room." Sir Edmund frowned. "Your Grace?" Laurence turned. "Yesterday, private details were printed and distributed before hundreds of people. Today, the proposed remedy is to open every remaining private record voluntarily. That is not investigation. It is surrender." "Then what do you propose?" Laurence looked at Cordelia, not at Horace, not at Christabel. Cordelia understood that the question was hers to answer. She drew a slow breath. "We contact the affected women privately." Horace gave a short laugh. "And ask them to testify. We ask them what they are willing to give. There is no difference. There is every difference." Cordelia stepped closer to the table. "Each woman may refuse entirely. She may provide a written statement without her name. She may surrender one specific letter. She may speak privately before a solicitor. She may appear publicly if she chooses. But no one will be compelled to expose her life merely because the society failed to protect it." One of the older committee ladies looked troubled. That could take weeks. Then it takes weeks. Donors will leave. Some already have. Sir Edmund stiffened. You say that very calmly. Cordelia looked at him. I am calm because panic does not make theft less wrong. Christabel rose. This society exists because respectable people trust its management. If we seem secretive now, confidence will collapse. Confidence has already collapsed, Cordelia said. The question is whether we restore it honestly or by sacrificing the women who trusted us. The room fell quiet. Horace broke the silence first. You are still suspended. Cordelia turned toward him. From independent access, yes. From active duty. By whose final authority? The committee's, Laurence spoke. Not mine. Horace's face hardened. With respect, Your Grace, your position as principal patron does not grant you sole power. Quite right. Laurence's tone remained mild. That is why I am not claiming sole power. I am asking whether the committee intends to vote openly on a measure that would expose confidential beneficiaries without their consent. No one answered. Laurence continued. If so, let us record each name beside each vote. Sir Edmund looked away. Christabel did not. You would threaten us with scandal, she asked. No, I would merely preserve accountability. I have recently developed a fondness for it. Cordelia almost smiled, but the moment was too sharp. Instead, she placed both hands lightly on the table. I will remain suspended if that is the committee's decision. Laurence's gaze moved to her. Cordelia. It was the first time he had used her Christian name. The sound of it startled her more than she wished to admit. He seemed to realize it too, but neither of them corrected the moment. No, she said. Let them suspend me. Horace leaned back. Satisfaction flickered across his face. Cordelia continued. But they do not get the archive. His satisfaction vanished. What exactly are you proposing? Christabel asked. Cordelia looked around the room. The archive remains sealed. 2 independent custodians hold the keys. No petition is opened without the writer's consent or clear evidence tied to a specific crime. Meanwhile, I will contact the women whose packets were compromised. Not as secretary, as the person they already know. You cannot act on behalf of the society while suspended, Horace said. Then I will not. You think that distinction will protect you? No, Cordelia's voice stayed quiet. I think it will protect them. That silenced him. Laurence came away from the window. I support her proposal. Sir Edmund sighed. Of course you do. The insult was indirect, but everyone heard it. Laurence did not flinch. If you mean to suggest that my judgment is compromised by personal feeling, say it plainly. Sir Edmund reddened. I meant no offense. Then you achieved one accidentally. Christabel intervened. Your Grace, the appearance of favoritism is already damaging the society. Laurence looked at her. Then perhaps the society should become more interested in truth than appearances. A messenger entered before Christabel could answer. He carried 3 folded notes. One was from a titled patron withdrawing her annual subscription. The second came from a banker's widow doing the same. The third contained no explanation at all, only a returned pledge card. Horace placed them on the table. This is the cost of delay. Cordelia looked at the notes. No, this is the cost of fear. And who pays for it? At present, everyone except the people who caused it. The words left a mark. She saw it in Horace's eyes. She saw something else in Christabel's. Calculation. Cordelia understood then that the demand to open the archive was not simply a reaction to scandal. It was part of the plan. Whoever had stolen the packets had obtained selected secrets. Whoever had planted the program excerpts had used those secrets to create panic. Now, that panic was being used to force open the entire confidential archive. The villains did not need to steal every petition if the committee could be persuaded to expose them voluntarily. Cordelia looked at Laurence. He saw the realization before she spoke. "They want us to open it ourselves," she said. The room went still. Christabel's expression remained perfect. Too perfect, Horace frowned. "That is absurd." "Is it?" Cordelia asked. "Someone steals selected correspondence. Then private details appear in public programs. Then, before the ink is dry, the answer proposed is to open every sealed petition. How fortunate for the thief." Sir Edmund shifted uneasily. Laurence looked at the bundles of printed inserts. A crime creates panic. Panic destroys the protections the crime could not breach. Cordelia nodded. "Exactly." Christabel's voice chilled. "You are making dangerous insinuations." Cordelia met her gaze. "No, I am recognizing a method." Laurence stepped beside her, not before her. "Then we change the method." Cordelia looked toward the locked cabinet door at the far end of the room. "We contact the women. We ask permission. We collect only what they choose to give," Horace said. "And if no one agrees," Cordelia turned to him, "then we do not steal their privacy to rescue my reputation." His eyes narrowed. "You would remain suspected." She held his gaze. "Yes." The answer surprised even Laurence. Cordelia felt it in the brief stillness beside her. Then he said quietly, "You may not have to." She looked at him. "Why?" He glanced toward the sealed archive. "Because one of those petitions may already contain the proof we need." Cordelia's face changed. She knew which one he meant before he said it. The violet seal. 7 years unopened, a secret that might clear them both. And for the first time, Cordelia understood that the next test would not be whether she could find the truth. It would be whether she could refuse to take it. The violet-sealed petition remained on the table between Cordelia and Laurence for nearly a full minute before either of them spoke. Morning light lay across the walnut surface, catching the imperfect pressed flower in the wax. 7 years had passed since an unknown woman had written the words on the outer fold, "To be opened only if I return." She had never returned. Until now, the petition had represented restraint. That morning, it represented temptation. Cordelia stood on one side of the desk in the small records office. Laurence stood on the other. The corridor door remained open, and the elderly committee widow who had witnessed their earlier conversations sat quietly near the window with her sewing. No one touched the paper. "You think it may contain proof," Laurence said. Cordelia nodded. "Not proof of the entire scheme. Possibly proof that Lady Christabel knew a confidential token number she had no legitimate reason to. No. Why this petition? Because the woman who wrote it once came to the society after an encounter involving Lady Christabel. I did not know that when she first left the petition. I learned it later from a brief note she sent before disappearing from London." Laurence looked at the seal. "And you never opened this?" "No, even after receiving that later note. The instructions on the petition did not change." Cordelia heard how simple the answer sounded. The consequences were not simple at all. Opening the petition might clear her name. It might restore the donors who had withdrawn their support. It might protect Laurence from the whispers already spreading through London. That the Duke of Highcombe had compromised his judgment for a woman. Under suspicion. It might even prove that Christabel had known the identity behind a numbered token. Long before she could lawfully have learned it, Cordelia said, "If the petition contains what I suspect, it could help us." Laurence's gaze moved to hers. Oos, you are being accused now too. I have survived accusation before. That does not make it harmless. No. His voice softened. It makes it familiar. Cordelia looked away. She knew what society was doing to him. The old Somerleigh scandal had resurfaced in gossip columns and drawing rooms. Men who had once called Laurence arrogant for refusing to expose a relative's private correspondence now suggested he had always possessed a dangerous weakness for secrecy. Women who had admired his restraint last month were suddenly calling it evasiveness. Cordelia knew the pattern. Society loved mystery until mystery refused to satisfy it. She looked back at the violet wax. Opening this might protect your name as well as mine. Laurence was silent. Then he asked, would opening it make you the woman the confession says you are? Cordelia felt the question more deeply than any accusation she had endured. She could have answered quickly. Instead, she looked at the old seal and allowed herself to feel the full weight of the truth. The false confession claimed she had traded women's secrets for advantage. If she broke this seal now, because the contents might save her, the motive would be different. The violation would not. Her throat tightened. Yes, the word came quietly. Laurence did not hesitate. Then it remains closed. Cordelia stared at him. You understand what that may cost? Yes, you could lose subscribers from the society. They are not mine to lose. Your reputation, already damaged. Your political influence, frequently overrated. Despite herself, she almost smiled. Then the seriousness returned. Laurence. It was the first time she had used his Christian name. The room seemed to notice before either of them did. His expression changed, not dramatically, but enough. Cordelia continued, this is not a small sacrifice. Neither is becoming guilty to prove someone else wrong. She looked at him. He stepped no closer. He did not reach for her hand. That restraint made the moment more intimate than touch might have done. I will not ask you to become guilty in order to prove me wise for trusting you, he said. Cordelia felt something inside her give way. Not caution, not self-command, something older. The belief that every powerful person eventually demanded access as the price of protection. She had expected him to argue. She had expected him to say the circumstances justified the act. She had expected kindness to become pressure once the cost grew high enough. He did none of those things. Then what do we do? She asked. Laurence looked at the petition. We ask. Cordelia understood at once. The writer. If she can be found, and if she refuses, then she refuses. Even if one fact could clear us both. Especially then, Cordelia lowered her gaze because she could no longer trust her face. The old seal blurred for one moment before she forced herself steady. I have an address from 7 years ago. Is it still useful? Probably not. Then we begin there. They did. By afternoon, Cordelia had written a letter with no pressure hidden inside courtesy. She did not ask to open the petition. She did not promise restoration, money, or protection. She explained only that an old confidential number had become relevant to an inquiry and asked whether the writer would consent to disclose one limited fact concerning Lady Christabel Charnwood. The letter ended with a sentence Cordelia rewrote 3 times before leaving it as simple as possible. Your refusal will be respected completely. 4 days passed. During those days, the scandal did not sleep. 2 more donors withdrew. A newspaper printed a small paragraph implying that the Duke of Highcombe had become emotionally entangled with the woman accused of compromising the society. Another revived the old Somerleigh correspondence scandal and suggested Laurence's judgment had always been distorted by private loyalties. Cordelia read neither article twice. Once was enough. On the 5th morning, she found Laurence in the records office, holding a folded reply. He did not open it. "It is addressed to you." Cordelia stopped breathing for half a second. Where was it posted? Kent. She took the letter. Her fingers were steady until she saw the handwriting. Not the same as the petition. Older now, firmer, but unmistakably connected. Cordelia broke the outer seal. Inside was a single sheet. She read slowly. Then again, Laurence waited. "She is alive," Cordelia said. Relief moved through her so suddenly that she had to sit down. 7 years of wondering had ended in 3 words. "She is alive." Laurence did not interrupt. Cordelia continued reading. The woman did not consent to opening the original petition. She did not consent to revealing her name, her family, or the contents of what she had written. But she consented to one fact being disclosed. One fact only. Cordelia looked up. Years ago, before she had given her name to anyone at the society, Lady Christabel addressed her by a private token number. Laurence went still. "Which number?" Cordelia looked back at the letter. 47. The same number stamped on both brass tokens. The same number copied from where? The same number around which the entire mystery had begun. Laurence's expression hardened, and Christabel had no legitimate access to the identity behind it. None. Cordelia's pulse quickened. The society's public records showed only the number. The identity was held separately. Laurence moved closer to the desk, though he still did not touch the letter. Then she knew something she should not have known. "Yes." "Will the writer testify?" Cordelia read the final lines. "Not publicly, but she consents to a written statement confirming this single fact." Laurence nodded. No frustration. No demand for more. "Then we use only what she gave." Cordelia looked at him. "You still have not asked what the petition contains." "No." "Do you want to know?" He met her eyes. Yes, the honesty startled her. He gave the faintest smile. "I thought you preferred truth." "I do." "Then here it is. I want to know. I am curious enough to be extremely inconvenient about it." A small laugh escaped her before she could stop it. "That is more convincing." "Good. But you still will not ask me to open it?" "No." "Why?" Laurence looked toward the closed document box. "Because trust is not proven by possessing everything another person knows." The words settled quietly between them. Cordelia felt the distance she had kept around her heart for years become suddenly harder to defend. Not because he had rescued her. Not because he was a duke, because when the easiest path to innocence required taking what did not belong to them, he had chosen the harder road without asking her to become smaller. She folded the reply carefully. "One fact," she said. "One fact," Laurence agreed. Cordelia looked again at the number written in the letter, 47. For the first time, Lady Christabel Charnwood was not merely connected to suspicion. She was connected to impossible knowledge, and somewhere beneath that fact lay the question that could finally break the blackmail scheme open. Cordelia spread the permitted records across the long table in the society office and forced herself to ignore everything she was not entitled to see. No sealed petition, no private name, no confidential family history. Only dates, token numbers, packet preparation marks, collection entries, and the narrow trail left by people who had believed anonymity would protect them. Laurence stood opposite her. Mr. Pembroke sat at one end of the table with his notes. The elderly committee widow, who had witnessed earlier examinations, occupied her usual chair near the window. Horace Treadwell had been informed that the review would proceed under independent supervision. He had objected in writing. That alone did not prove guilt. Cordelia reminded herself of that, because anger was dangerous when it began pretending to be certainty. She placed 3 compromised packet entries side by side, then added token 63 and the blackmail letters voluntarily provided by the woman they had met. The dates matter, she said. Laurence leaned closer without touching the papers. Show me. Cordelia pointed to the first entry. This packet was prepared on a Tuesday and collected the next morning. Her finger moved to the second. This one remained for 4 days. Then the third. This one was taken within 6 hours of arrival. Laurence studied the pattern. So speed alone does not decide which packet is stolen. No, then something else does. Cordelia nodded. She had been thinking about that all night. The poorest women were not targeted most often. Mr. Pembroke looked up. What do you mean? If the motive were money, the thief would take whatever packet was likely to contain the largest payment, but several ordinary cash relief packets were collected correctly during the same weeks. She moved 3 records aside. These were untouched. Laurence's gaze sharpened. What do the stolen packets have in common? Cordelia answered slowly. A secret someone else might pay to control. The room became still. She indicated the first compromised packet, an employment reply involving an influential household. The second, correspondence from estranged relatives with money and social standing. The third, a landlord's response connected to a family dispute. She touched the record for token 63, an offer of employment that could be destroyed by one damaging disclosure. Laurence looked at the blackmail letter. They were not selecting the most desperate women. No, they were selecting the most profitable shame. Cordelia hated the phrase because it was exactly right. Mr. Pembroke exhaled quietly. Then the collector must know what kind of correspondence is expected before taking the packet. Yes, Cordelia said, and that narrows the problem. Laurence looked toward the door, as though Horace might be standing behind it. Someone had access to packet notations, or to the people preparing them. Cordelia gathered the sheets. We need Bell and Hart again. 2 hours later, the receiving room behind the stationer's shop was closed to ordinary customers. Mr. Bell had summoned the senior clerk, who kept the packet ledger, and the apprentice, who often worked near the rear entrance. This time, Cordelia asked only one question at first. Did the same messenger ever collect more than 1 packet? The senior clerk hesitated. Laurence noticed. You may answer honestly without protecting your employer, he said. Mr. Bell stiffened, but said nothing. The clerk swallowed. Yes, Cordelia's pulse quickened. How often? Several times. 1 packet at a time. Sometimes 3, once 4. Mr. Pembroke's pen stopped, and he presented a different token for each. Yes, did that seem unusual? Cordelia asked. Not after Mr. Treadwell's office sent word that certain beneficiaries used authorized messengers. Mr. Bell turned sharply. I was never told that. The clerk looked alarmed. The notes carried the society's hand. Whose hand? Laurence asked. The man hesitated again. Mr. Treadwell's initials were on 2. Silence fell. Cordelia felt no triumph, only the cold confirmation of a pattern. Did the messenger ever ask for packets by number before presenting the tokens? She asked. Yes. And did he sometimes arrive near closing? Usually. The apprentice by the door spoke suddenly, because fewer people were here. Everyone turned. The boy reddened. Cordelia softened her voice. Tell us what you remember. He came through the rear entrance twice. Said he didn't want to trouble the ladies at the front counter. Did anyone instruct you to admit him? Once. Who? The apprentice looked down. A note from Mr. Treadwell's office. Lawrence's expression became dangerously calm. Do you still have it? No, Your Grace. Why not? We were told to burn routine collection slips after entry. Horace had always understood the value of disappearing paper. Cordelia looked at Mr. Pembroke. The office, the solicitor nodded, with witnesses. That afternoon, Horace's business office was examined under witnessed legal supervision, not because Laurence ordered a theatrical seizure, but because Mr. Pembroke had obtained access to records connected directly to the society's finances and missing packets. Horace protested from the moment they arrived. This is harassment disguised as inquiry. Laurence stood near the door. You may be relieved to know I dislike disguises. Horace's eyes flashed. You have already decided what you want to find. No, but I have become interested in what you are afraid we might. The search was careful. No private drawer unrelated to the society was opened. No personal correspondence was read. Cordelia watched every boundary because she refused to become careless merely because the man under suspicion had shown no such restraint. For nearly an hour, they found nothing. Then Mr. Pembroke lifted a narrow account memorandum from beneath a stack of merchant invoices. No names appeared on it. Only numbers: 47, 63, 12, 81. Beside each was a sum: £5, £3, £7, £2. Cordelia stopped breathing for a moment. Horace stepped forward. That proves nothing. Then explain it, Mr. Pembroke said. Routine calculations. Cordelia looked at the blackmail letters. £5 had been demanded first, then 3. The sums matched, not approximately, exactly. Laurence saw it too. How unfortunate, he said quietly. Horace's composure slipped. Anyone could have written that list. Cordelia picked up nothing. She merely looked, but someone knew which numbers were worth money. Horace said nothing. The truth sharpened in her mind. Horace had managed collection routes, approvals, and messengers, but the pattern went beyond logistics. The targeted packets involved reputations with social value. Someone had known which estranged family mattered, which employer could be frightened, which private scandal might command payment. Someone moved easily among titled houses and fashionable drawing rooms. Someone understood shame as currency. Cordelia thought of Lady Christabel saying that respectable people trusted the society's management. She thought of the program inserts. The demand to open the archive, the impossible knowledge of Token 47. Horace handled access, she said. Laurence looked at her, and Christabel chose the targets. Horace's face changed. Barely enough. Before anyone could press further, a messenger arrived with a sealed committee notice. Lady Christabel Charnwood had called an emergency meeting for the following morning. Her proposal was simple: dissolve the Quiet Relief Society before scandal destroyed every subscriber connected to it. Cordelia read the notice twice. She wants the records dispersed before we finish. Mr. Pembroke nodded. Or destroyed under the excuse of closure. Laurence looked at Cordelia. What do you need from me? The wording struck her again. Not what will you do, not what shall I order. What do you need? Cordelia looked at the memorandum, then at the 2 brass tokens locked in witnessed custody. Same number, same scratch. One genuine, one copied from where? Suddenly, the answer was obvious. Witnesses. Laurence waited. Nothing more? Nothing more. She looked at him steadily. For once, Your Grace is an accessory. His eyebrow rose. I have been called worse. An assistant, then. That is considerably more humiliating. Cordelia almost smiled. Then she turned back to the tokens. We have spent days proving what may have happened. I would rather show them what happens. Mr. Pembroke frowned. How? Cordelia placed one finger beside the record for token 47. One woman cannot be in two places at once. Laurence understood first. His expression changed. Two counters. Yes. At the same time. Yes. She looked at the identical numbers again. If both tokens are accepted, the flaw becomes visible to everyone. Lawrence's voice lowered. And if someone tries to stop the test? Cordelia looked toward the sealed notice from Christabel. Then we learn who is most afraid of it. She placed both identical tokens side by side on the table. Tomorrow morning we discover whether one woman can be in two places at once. Bell and Hart had never looked less like a stationer's shop. By 8 the next morning, the ordinary customers had been turned away. The front shutters remained half lowered, and the long receiving room behind the main counter had been cleared of ink boxes, ledgers, wrapping twine, and bundles of cream stationery. Two polished mahogany counters stood opposite one another beneath tall windows. Between them lay 10 feet of open floor. It was not a courtroom. Cordelia wanted no imitation of one. It was simply the place where the society's weakness had become useful to someone dishonest, and where she intended to make that weakness visible. She arrived before Laurence and found Mr. Bell inspecting the locks for the third time. His senior clerk stood at the front entrance. The younger apprentice guarded the rear passage. Mr. Pembroke had already taken possession of the decoy packet, which contained nothing private, nothing dangerous, and nothing that belonged to any frightened woman, only a blank folded card sealed with violet wax. Cordelia looked at the small packet and felt a brief ache at the sight of that color. The old petition remained untouched in the society archive, still sealed, still belonging to its writer. This packet was different. It had no secret inside. That was precisely why it could be risked. Laurence entered with Mr. Vale, the metalworker, and 2 independent clerks from another stationer's firm. He wore a dark coat and the same controlled expression he had worn on the morning. He first noticed the repeated scratch. Yet Cordelia had come to recognize the signs beneath his calm. The slight stillness in his shoulders meant he was thinking quickly. The absence of wit meant he was angry. "You are early," she said. "I was told assistants should be punctual. I believe I said accessory first." A word my solicitor discouraged. Mr. Pembroke looked up from his papers. Wisely. Cordelia almost smiled. Almost. The room carried too much tension for ease, but the small exchange steadied her. Laurence came closer, stopping an appropriate distance away. "Everything is arranged." Almost. She pointed toward the first counter. "The genuine holder of token 47 will arrive through the front entrance at 9. Then she indicated the second. "The duplicate remains in witnessed custody until the appointed moment. And the decoy packet behind counter 2. Mr. Bell cleared his throat. "I still do not understand how this proves who ordered the thefts." Cordelia turned to him. "It may not prove everything." "Then why do it?" "Because the false token was made for use. Someone copied where, reproduced the number, and planted one token in my desk. That means someone trusted the system enough to believe a duplicate would work." Laurence added, "And people are often most revealing when a familiar method suddenly stops being private." Mr. Bell did not look comforted. Cordelia understood. Honest shopkeepers rarely enjoyed discovering that their procedures had helped dishonest men. "What do you expect to happen?" he asked. "One of 3 things," Cordelia said. "Someone may try to stop the test. Someone may attempt to replace the expected messenger. Or someone may proceed exactly as before, because they do not know we are watching. Laurence glanced toward the rear entrance. And which do you expect? The third. Why? Because Horace has spent days insisting there was no scheme. If he suddenly interferes with an ordinary collection, he creates the suspicion he has been trying to dismiss. Then we let confidence do the work. Yes. Cordelia looked toward the two counters. Arrogance is often more useful than confession. Mr. Pembroke closed one document case. The witnesses understand that no private petition is to be opened. No beneficiary name is to be recorded unless voluntarily given, and no one is to restrain anyone by force. If a messenger attempts to leave, the clerk may close the door and ask him to remain while circumstances are documented. Nothing more. Laurence nodded. Good. Cordelia noticed that he did not add an order of his own. He had brought authority into the room, but he was not trying to make the room belong to him. That mattered more each time she saw it. At 8:30, the woman connected to token 47 arrived through a side passage. She wore a dark veil and plain cloak. Cordelia went to meet her alone first, then returned with her only after confirming once more that participation remained voluntary. The woman looked at the assembled witnesses and stopped. So many. You may still leave, Cordelia said. Nothing changes if you do. The woman looked at Laurence, and he agrees. Laurence stood near the far wall. I do, even after all this, especially after all this. The woman studied him for a moment, then nodded. I will stay. Cordelia led her to a small waiting room near the front counter. The genuine token remained in the woman's possession. No one took it from her. At 8:45, Lady Christabel arrived. She wore deep green silk and an expression of controlled contempt. Horace came 2 minutes later. He appeared calm enough to convince anyone who had not watched him for weeks. Cordelia had watched him. She noticed the moment his eyes moved toward the rear entrance. Christabel surveyed the two counters. What exactly is this spectacle meant to achieve? Clarity, Cordelia said. A commodity society often finds less attractive than scandal. Christabel's gaze chilled. You have grown bold? No, merely less convenient. Laurence looked away, but not before Cordelia saw the faintest movement at the corner of his mouth. Horace approached the center of the room. You intend to present both tokens at once? Eventually, Cordelia said. And the rightful holder, here voluntarily. Her identity, not yours. His expression tightened, still hiding behind confidentiality, still respecting it. The clock on the wall moved closer to 9. Cordelia felt every sound sharpen. The scrape of a clerk's shoe, the faint rattle of a carriage in the street. Paper settling somewhere behind a counter. She thought of the first accusation, the velvet tray, the confession she had refused to read. She thought of the women whose private words had been turned into printed entertainment. She thought of the blackmail letters and the sums beside anonymous numbers, £5, £3, £7, shame converted into arithmetic. Laurence moved beside her. Are you afraid? Cordelia looked at the clock. Yes. Good. She turned. Good. I had begun to think competence had ruined that too. The echo of their earlier exchange surprised her so completely that she gave him a sharp look. He smiled, barely, enough to loosen something inside her. You are impossible, she said. I have had excellent training. From whom? London. The clock struck 9. The sound changed the room. Everyone went still. Mr. Bell opened the front entrance. In the waiting room, the holder of token 47 drew a steady breath. Cordelia nodded to her. The woman stepped forward. At the same moment, a knock sounded at the rear door. The apprentice looked toward Cordelia. She nodded once. He opened it. A man in a plain brown coat stood there with his hat low over his brow. He was neither Horace nor anyone Cordelia recognized. He held no packet, only instructions. "I am here for a collection," he said. The apprentice asked. "Which number?" the man answered, without hesitation. 47. Cordelia felt the room tighten. Horace did not move. Christabel did not blink. Laurence's gaze went cold. At the front counter, the legitimate holder placed the genuine brass token upon the mahogany. At the rear counter, the messenger reached into his coat and produced its twin. Same number, same scratch, same copied where, 2 people, 2 doors, 1 identity. And for the first time, everyone in the room saw the impossible thing happen at once. For 1 suspended second, no one moved. The genuine holder of token 47 stood at the front counter, with 1 gloved hand resting beside the brass piece. At the rear counter, the messenger in the brown coat stared at its duplicate as though the metal itself had betrayed him. Same number, same scratch, same copied where. The impossible thing was no longer a theory. It lay in plain sight on 2 separate stretches of mahogany 10 feet apart. Cordelia felt the entire room understand at once. Mr. Bell's senior clerk went pale. Mr. Vale, the metal worker, stepped forward and examined first 1 token, then the other without touching either. "The genuine token is at the front counter," he said. "The rear token is the copy I examined before." The messenger shifted toward the rear door. The apprentice closed it quietly. Mr. Pembroke spoke before anyone else could. "You are not being detained by force. We are asking you to remain while the circumstances of this collection are recorded." The messenger looked at Horace. It was only a glance, brief, instinctive, fatal. Horace saw it and snapped. "Do not look at me." Silence struck the room harder than a shout. Laurence did not move. Cordelia did not need to look at him to know he had noticed. Everyone had. The messenger swallowed. "I was told to collect a packet." "By whom?" Cordelia asked. "I don't know his name, but you knew the number. It was given to me. And you knew to use the rear entrance." "I was told." "By whom?" His eyes went again toward Horace. Horace's face lost color. "This is absurd. The man could have been sent by anyone." Cordelia turned to the clerk behind counter 2. "Proceed exactly as you would have yesterday." The clerk hesitated. Laurence said nothing. Cordelia held his gaze until he nodded. He reached beneath the counter and produced the decoy packet. The messenger accepted it automatically. That was enough. Cordelia said, "Open it." The man looked startled. "What? Open what you came to steal." His fingers shook as he broke the seal. Inside lay a blank folded card marked only with violet wax. No woman's name, no private confession, no frightened history. Nothing to sell. The messenger stared at it. Cordelia watched realization move through the room. Whoever had sent him expected token 47 to be valuable. The man had arrived before the legitimate holder could collect anything. He had used the duplicate. He had followed the exact method that had stolen the previous packets. Mr. Bell's senior clerk spoke next. "I know him." The messenger stiffened. "You've come before, not once." Several times Mr. Bell turned sharply. "You are certain?" "Yes." The clerk pointed toward the rear door, always near closing, always with numbers already written down. The apprentice added, "And twice with notes from Mr. Treadwell's office." Horace stepped back. "Clerical notes. Nothing more." Mr. Pembroke opened his document case. "Then perhaps you can explain this." He placed the narrow memorandum on the counter. No names appeared. Only token numbers beside demanded sums. 47, 63, 12, 81, £5, £3, £7, £2. Cordelia looked at the messenger. How much were you paid? I don't have to answer. No, she said. You don't. That surprised him. Cordelia turned to the veiled woman at the front counter. You may leave now if you wish. The woman remained where she was. No. Her voice was quiet but steady. I came to see whether the number they used against me could finally speak for me. Cordelia felt the words deep in her chest. Then it will, Mr. Pembroke produced the blackmail letters voluntarily surrendered by another victim. One demand was for £5, the next for 3. The sums matched the memorandum exactly. Horace began speaking too quickly. Anyone could have written those numbers. Anyone could have copied my initials. Anyone could have instructed a messenger. Laurence finally spoke. You appear surrounded by remarkable coincidence. Horace turned on him. You have wanted me guilty from the beginning. No. Lawrence's voice was cold. From the beginning, I wanted the evidence to make sense. Christabel had remained silent through all of it. Too silent. Her composure was nearly perfect. She looked at the messenger, the memorandum, the duplicate token, and then at Cordelia. At most, this proves that Mr. Treadwell abused the society's procedures. Horace stared at her. Christabel continued. It does not connect me to any theft, any forged confession, or any private correspondence. The betrayal in Horace's face was immediate. Cordelia saw it. So did Laurence. Christabel had already chosen the shape of her survival. Horace would carry everything. Cordelia turned toward the legitimate holder of token 47. You are still free to leave. The veiled woman drew a breath. I know, and you need not give your name. I know, nor remove your veil. The woman lifted her chin. I know. Cordelia stepped back. The choice belonged to her. The woman spoke to the room. Years ago, before I had given my name to anyone connected with the society, Lady Christabel addressed me by my private token number. Christabel's expression did not change. That is false. You called me 47. I have met hundreds of women. Then perhaps you remember too many numbers. Christabel gave a short, dismissive laugh. This widow has clearly been coached. The room froze. Cordelia did not ask a clever question. She did not need to. No one had said the woman was a widow. The token register carried a number, not a name. The woman had given no marital status. Even Horace looked at Christabel now. Laurence's face became utterly still. Christabel realized what she had done. Too late. The veiled woman said, I never told you I was a widow. Christabel opened her mouth. Nothing came. Horace laughed once. There was no humor in it. There, now you see. Christabel turned on him. Be silent. Why? So you can leave me with all of it. You handled the collections because you chose the numbers. Cordelia felt the final piece fall into place. Horace pointed toward the memorandum. She told me which women mattered, which families would pay to keep a scandal quiet, which employers could be frightened, which estranged relatives had money. I arranged the tokens. I arranged the messenger. She selected the shame. Christabel's face had lost its polish. You liar. You prepared the confession when Miss Vallance started asking questions. Horace looked at Cordelia now, almost accusingly. The duplicate was planted in her desk because everyone would believe the woman who guarded the numbers had sold them. Cordelia did not answer. She did not need to. The 2 tokens answered for her. The forged confession had been meant to give a lie her voice. She had refused. Now the objects meant to convict her stood openly as proof of the crime. Mr. Pembroke gathered the memorandum, the blackmail letters, the clerk statements, and the witnessed record of the double redemption. These materials will be referred through the proper legal channels. Horace looked toward the door. You cannot imprison me. Lawrence's voice remained measured. No one here has claimed that authority. Mr. Pembroke added, The magistrate will decide what follows. Christabel straightened. And what of me? Cordelia looked at her. For the first time, the woman who had always spoken as though charity belonged to her seemed to understand that society was watching without admiration. Cordelia said, You will no longer speak for women whose secrets you sold. By the end of the morning, Christabel had been removed from every society office. Horace lost all access to records and funds. Their names would go forward with the evidence. The subscribers present withdrew their confidence from both. No applause followed. Cordelia was grateful for that. Justice did not require celebration. It required truth, consequence, and the restoration of what had been taken. Laurence waited until Cordelia had finished before he addressed the witnesses. I lent my title to this society and mistook respectable names for reliable safeguards. Rank is not oversight. Patronage is not innocence. He did not excuse himself. He did not claim credit. Cordelia looked at him and understood why that mattered. Then she turned to the two counters, to the genuine token, the counterfeit twin, and the women whose lives had been reduced to profitable numbers. No woman should have to purchase bread with her name. The room remained silent. This time, silence was not accusation. It was witness. Later, after the others had gone and the counters stood empty, Laurence found Cordelia alone beside the place where the two tokens had rested. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he said, I have wanted to ask you something for some time. Cordelia looked at him. His expression was softer than she had ever seen it. Then he added, Not today. She understood. He would not turn justice into scenery for a proposal. Something warm and painful moved through her. Before she could answer, Mr. Pembroke appeared at the doorway holding a single sealed letter, Miss Vallance. This arrived at the society office. Cordelia took it. The handwriting was familiar. The writer of the violet-sealed petition had answered again. The letter remained unopened in Cordelia's hand. Until she reached the society office, she did not break the seal in the stationer's receiving room, nor in Laurence's carriage, nor beneath the curious gaze of any committee member. The message belonged first to the woman who had written it, and Cordelia had learned too much about stolen privacy to turn even relief into spectacle. In the quiet records office, with the violet-sealed petition resting inside its box, and the door open to the corridor, she finally read the reply. The woman was alive, safe, living under another name in Kent. She did not wish to reopen the past. She asked only for the original petition to be returned to her exactly as it had been kept, unopened. Cordelia read the sentence twice. Then she pressed the paper lightly against the desk and closed her eyes. 7 years of wondering ended not with revelation, but with restraint fulfilled. Laurence stood several feet away. He had accompanied her because she asked him to. Nothing more. She wants it returned, Cordelia said. Unopened? Unopened? He nodded once. Then that is what she should receive. Cordelia looked at him. You still haven't asked what I think is inside. I still want to know. That is not the same thing. No. His gaze held hers. Wanting has become one of my more educational inconveniences. A small smile escaped her. The smile did not feel disloyal to the women who had suffered. For the first time, it felt like evidence that suffering had not taken everything. The months that followed brought consequences slowly, then completely. Horace Treadwell was removed from every office connected to the society before formal proceedings began. His correspondence, the numerical memorandum, the blackmail letters voluntarily surrendered by victims, the duplicated token, and the witnessed account of the simultaneous redemption passed through solicitors and into the proper legal process. He was eventually convicted on charges arising from forgery, unlawful demands, and the blackmail scheme. The newspapers that had once printed suspicions about Cordelia now printed his name in connection with disgrace. She took no pleasure in the humiliation itself. Consequence mattered. Cruelty performed for applause did not become justice merely because the target deserved punishment. Lady Christabel Charnwood lost something she had valued even more than money. Access. Her committee positions vanished. Invitations ceased. Patrons who had once admired her charitable elegance discovered sudden moral clarity when association with her became socially expensive. The debts hidden behind her polished authority could no longer be concealed by prestige, and the women whose suffering she had treated as usable property no longer had to listen to her speak in the language of benevolence. No one asked Cordelia to forgive her. Cordelia was grateful for that. Some wrongs required accountability, not reconciliation. The Quiet Relief Society survived, but it did not return to its old form. Cordelia insisted upon changes before accepting any permanent position. No single official could again hold both a woman's token number and her sealed identity record. 2 independent custodians would be required for sensitive access. Participating shops would record every packet collection with witnessed marks. No messenger could collect multiple confidential packets without written authorization, reviewed by more than one officer. More importantly, no beneficiary would ever be displayed before donors as proof of generosity unless she chose to appear. The society lost several wealthy subscribers. It gained others. Cordelia discovered that institutions, like people, sometimes had to become smaller before they could become honest. Her own name was formally cleared before the committee, and in written notices sent to every subscriber who had received the original accusation. She did not ask for speeches. She asked for correction. That was enough. Laurence remained beside her through all of it, but never so close that his presence swallowed her work. He called properly. He sent his card. He visited in daylight. He accompanied her to concerts, carriage drives, and morning meetings where propriety was preserved without turning affection into distance. They argued often. Cordelia found this unexpectedly delightful. He thought some donors cowardly. She thought him too pleased by his own insults. He accused her of being severe with comforting illusions. She accused him of being in love with a clever phrase. "I'm wounded," he told her once. "You recover suspiciously quickly." "I've had practice." Their courtship became known gradually then, obviously. Society, having once suspected scandal, now pretended it had foreseen romance. Cordelia found that particularly amusing. Months after the morning, at Bell and Hart, Laurence asked her to walk with him in the walled garden behind his London house. No audience waited, no committee watched, no token lay between them. He stopped beside a stone bench but did not sit. Cordelia knew before he spoke. The knowledge frightened her, not because she wished to refuse, but because some forms of happiness required a courage suffering did not. Laurence looked at her with the same attention he had given the 2 brass tokens on the first terrible morning. Noticing, waiting, never assuming. "I have wanted to ask you something for some time," he said. Cordelia's mouth curved. "That sounds familiar. I was hoping you had forgotten." "You know better." "Yes, regrettably." He took a breath. "Cordelia, I cannot promise never to want to know what you refuse to tell me." She raised an eyebrow, an unconventional beginning. "I thought honesty might improve my chances. Continue. I can promise to remember that wanting is not the same as being entitled." Her expression changed. He saw it. She let him. Laurence continued. "I do not love you because you were falsely accused. I do not love you because I helped uncover what happened. I loved your refusal before I understood what it would cost you. I loved the fact that when everyone demanded you save yourself, you still remembered the people who had less power than you did." Cordelia's throat tightened. "Laurence, marry me." He smiled faintly. "Not because I am a duke, not because your name has been cleared, not because London has changed its mind. Marry me because I would rather spend the rest of my life being corrected by you than praised by anyone else." Cordelia laughed softly through the ache in her chest. "That is dangerously close to romance. I was afraid you would notice." She looked at the man before her. Not the Duke, not the wounded name from old scandal, not the powerful patron who had once stood across a table and noticed an impossible scratch. The man who had never asked her to become smaller so that his protection could feel larger. The man who had trusted boundaries even when they cost him. "Yes," she said. His face changed. She had never seen happiness disarm him before. "Yes, do not make me repeat myself. It will encourage you." "I'm already encouraged." They married quietly after a proper courtship. No ballroom fell silent, no crowd applauded. Cordelia entered the church freely and left it as the Duchess of Highcombe, without surrendering the work or identity she had chosen before marriage. A year later, on a clear London morning, the violet-sealed petition left the society archive for the last time. The wax remained unbroken. Cordelia carried it herself to the posting office, where it would begin the journey back to Kent, and to the woman who had written it 7 years earlier. Laurence accompanied her as far as the door of the private receiving room, then stopped. He did not ask the woman's name. He did not ask what she had suffered. He did not ask what secrets rested beneath the violet wax. When Cordelia returned a few minutes later, the petition was gone. For one moment, she looked back toward the counter where it had been accepted for dispatch. 7 years of guarded mystery, still sealed, still belonging to its author. Laurence offered his arm. He did not take her hand first. Cordelia looked at him, then placed her hand upon his sleeve by choice. Together, they stepped into the London morning, while one woman's secret traveled safely home to the only person who had ever owned it.